Hard to say. He seems pretty ill. We sure could do with getting to one of our regular places. Not many supplies left here. How does that happen, the supplies? Not sure, really. I think the bigger guys go out and scout. Oi, you two. It was the boy with the dog who spoke. We're going out to check for a better place. Keep this lot under control. Mella's stomach lurched. What about the sick boy? How long would they be left? All sorts of questions mumbled in her head, but she said nothing. Okay, Rich squeezed her hand as he spoke. She untensed her shoulders. He was already feeling like an honorary brother. Suddenly, that was it. The older kids had squeezed their way out of the door, all but the unwounded twin. He stayed with his brother. What to do with a bunch of penned-in kids who'd been ripped from their normal lives? Mella gulped. Soon she and Rich were so immersed in playing and cleaning and feeding them that they barely noticed the return of the scouting party. Indeed, they'd been so preoccupied that they hadn't taken any notice of the wounded boy. It was him yelling that got their attention. Don't touch, don't touch, don't touch! They turned to look what was happening. Did you do what I said? Did you check the wound and clean it? The grim girl spoke through clenched teeth. I tried, but it seemed to hurt him so much. Okay, good I found some spray. This is going to sting, but do try not to yell. We don't want them out there finding us. Mella and Rich turned away as the girl eased the dressing off the leg, the boy writhing and sucking through his teeth. Mella tried not to think about what it must look like, even in this gloom. Come on, kids, let's sort some food out. Rich herded the children toward the dwindling boxes of supplies, while Mella gave cartons of drink to some and packets of some kind of pastry to others to hand out. Share properly and help the littlies. Mella was impressed with how it all worked. Clearly most of the children had adapted to this strange way of living. Almost the only sounds were slurping and sucking and the rattling tear of plastic, which more or less masked the hissing of the spray and the suppressed moans of the boy. A sharp, familiar smell of disinfectant wafted across the room, reminding Mella of Gray's knees and Mum. She really didn't want to think of Mum, the deep aching well of loss that always threatened to suck her into the dark. No more laughing walks with the dog or ice creams or hugs. Her eyes filled. She felt the wet of tears on her cheeks. Only when Rich's fingers gently wiped the moisture away did she come back into the room and what they were doing. Grateful to him for not speaking, she looked towards the group around the boy with the bad leg. Things seemed calm, but they were talking intently. Impossible to make out what they were saying, but it felt as though something was about to happen. The boy sat up, supporting himself on his hands. He swung his legs off the platform as though ready to stand, but his yelp of pain did not bode well. That's the blood going into your leg. Give it a few minutes. The boy with the dog gestured to the biggest guy in the place, who ambled across. Try Biggie back first. He's going to tip if he tries to walk. After a couple of goes, the boy was hanging from the big guy's back, but Mella was puzzled. It was looking pretty dark outside. It didn't make sense to leave now with so much to trip over in the rubble-strewn streets. She breathed easier when the boy was set back down. Okay, we're going to leave in the morning. We need to get to a better place, near one of the warehouses. We'll go as soon as it's light, so the sooner you all bed down for the night, the better. It was rare for Dog Boy to say so much. She wondered for a moment about the warehouses before giving herself a shake and helping Rich with the kids, taking them to the small room at the back to relieve themselves. The smell was getting so bad now that the whole place was tainted with it. After settling them under the covers, Rich and Mella curled up next to each other. Yet again Rich was asleep in what seemed like moments, and Mella lay listening to the room. The heavy breaths of the wounded boy, the whimpering of some, one or two snores, and the silence outside. Mella felt she hadn't slept at all when once again they were being roused. Up you get, you lot. Bring the blankets, pile up the rubbish, stash anything that's left. Mella rubbed her eyes, pulled on her shoes, rolled her blanket, and turned to check the others. Rich was already sorting out the smallest ones. Mella's heart warmed at the sight of how helpful all these kids were with each other, united in something so far from their making. Pretty soon they were standing and waiting, holding hands in pairs while the door was eased open and the big kids stepped out. Mella tried not to stare at the wounded boy in the steely light, his face grey as the sky. Sucking deeply on the fresh air, she didn't care either about the wet of the soaking drizzle, hoping the stench that tainted her nostrils would soon disappear. She jumped as someone tripped on the rubble. She didn't need to look up to see the glares that would have been sent down the line. She did wonder where they were headed. The air was less dusty as the drizzle now turned to rain and sent grimy rivulets amongst the fallen bricks and glass. Holding tighter onto the trusting hands clinging to hers, she tried but failed to see anything she could recognise in the grey ruins. Close enough to make her stomach lurch, the sound of falling bricks and glass heralded the collapse of another building. How could there be anywhere safer or better than the place they'd just left? A raised hand at the front was an unmistakable signal to stop. Nobody spoke as they waited for the crashing and rumbling to stop. A couple of the little ones were whimpering. Mella hoped the boy with the bad leg was coping okay, and the hero who was carrying him. When all seemed still again, they restarted. She wasn't sure how far they went. She lost count of corners turned and alleys stumbled through, but at some point the buildings weren't quite so tall, and even occasionally a tree survived, a hand raised through the mess. When they stopped in a street dotted with dusty and in some cases smashed up cars amongst the blocks of flats, did Mella realise how thirsty she was. They hadn't been allowed to stop for a drink at any point. She snuck a look at the guy carrying the wounded boy. She wasn't sure who looked worse now. One of the buildings ahead had metal fencing round it. They trailed in an untidy procession to somewhere round the back. The grumpy girl eased out one of the fence panels and they stepped through into a yard at the base of the building. Rich and Mella helped the tiredest of the littlies over the wooden support at the bottom. Opening a blue-painted door at the base of the block, the grumpy girl beckoned them through. "Head down those stairs and keep quiet till you get to the rooms." She flicked a switch on the wall and Mella was amazed to see a series of lights flicker on. She didn't understand how that could be. Only when she and Rich had seen all the children down and along a cold corridor did Mella pay attention to their surroundings. The wounded boy had gone, although intermittent moans showed he wasn't far away. The room they were in had a long trestle table with benches down one side and a wall of shelves along the other. Seeing large numbers of tins and cartons and packages, Mella wondered how come it was all there, like someone was ready for them. She also wondered where they would sleep. Rich nudged her. "It's weird, isn't it? I've been here before, can't remember when. I hope we stay for a bit. Come with me." They were just heading out of the door back into the cold corridor when an angry voice halted them. "Where the crap are you two going?" "I was just going to show her around." Rich stood as tall as he could manage. Mella smiled at his defiance. She liked the way his blonde hair flopped over his forehead. "Oh, really? Well, not now. There are things to do." "Why not? We won't be long, will we?" Lippy in front of your little girlfriend, aren't you?" Any warmth Mella had started feeling towards the girl melted away. Following Rich's lead, she stood with her arms folded. Mella was wondering, hot-faced, how this would pan out when the dog pushed past her and the boy entered the room. The boy and girl exchanged glances before sitting against the table and waving everyone to sit, on the floor. It seemed as though most were used to doing as they were told, as almost instantly they were all down and looking up at the pair. "Some of you know this place, and some are here for the first time. Be very clear. We are lucky to have it, and losing it would be a disaster, so no leaving or running around outside without our say-so. Sort some drinks out, and then we'll go to where you sleep." Yet again they had what they needed: beakers and jugs and even a tap for water. Mella couldn't remember the last time she drunk tap water and frowned at how they could have it here. It tasted okay, but she couldn't make sense of it. Don't guzzle. Who knows how long we'll have this? Be quick, then go sort out your beds. We can't have the lights on all night. Mella had no idea what to expect with the sleeping arrangements, and again wondered about how come it was all so organised. It turned out there were several rooms with bunks in, 3 tiers. The older you were, the higher you slept. She was relieved that she and Rich were allowed in the same room, top bunks, 12 kids counting them. Each bunk had a thin mattress but a decent blanket on. There was light in the corridor, but not the room. It was only as she laid back that she remembered that they hadn't eaten. Although she planned to chat with Rich, she fell asleep thinking of soup and bread and chocolate. She woke up hungry, so hungry it hurt. A couple of the littlies were grizzling, probably feeling the same as her. Sitting up, she rolled the blanket down and looked across at Rich. He was lying on his side, watching and smiling. He put his hand to his mouth, then clutched his stomach, pulling a face at the same time. Mella froze for a moment, thinking he was ill, then realised he was horsing about. Time to find breakfast. She hadn't noticed before there was a window at the top of what must have been an outside wall, shedding a murky half-light across the room. Mella scrambled down the ladder at the end of the bunk and helped those who were struggling with beds and shoes. Only fingers through tousled hair in the absence of brushes. She'd lost track of hers. The slap of running shoes on the concrete of the corridor set their lot moving, and soon the room with the table and food was full. Mella reckoned there was more than 40 of them, counting the big guys. No sign of the wounded boy. She wondered where he was for just a moment before following Rich's lead and helping dole out the bowls of a hot porridge that was standing at the end of the table. Mella frowned, trying to work out where it had been cooked. There was no talking as they all clattered into the food. It must have been nearly a day since they last ate. As the final spoon rattled in a bowl, the dog boy stood up, banging his cup on the table to silence anyone tempted to start chattering.